Welcome to Victims and Villains, the channel where we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Capt Nostalgia. I am a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival called Horrific Hope Film Festival. If you guys would like more information, including dates, submissions, where it's going to be held, all of that can be found in the show notes below. And if you guys would like links to our podcast, more movie reviews like this, social media, Patreon, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, all of that is going to be in the show notes below. I don't really know what I was trying to do there. I was trying to have the energetic nature of this movie into that, and I'm really awkward, and I'm bad at that, so let's get Honk for Jesus, save your soul. This movie tells the story of a disgraced pastor played by Sterling K. Brown, who, with his wife played by Regina Hall, hired a documentary crew basically to document their comeback story and redemption. As if I needed a reason for Jordan Peele to continue being one of my favorite filmmakers of the modern age, he goes and produces this little gem. If you guys have been listening to our podcast, whether it's been Victims and Villains, Abyss Gazing, or That's High Praise, all of which are co-host of. And that's not to brag, that's an actual fact. Again, links are in the show notes. You guys know that I don't stray away from identifying myself as a Christian, openly talking about the gospel, the Bible, and also my experiences with religious people as well. This movie, what I think it does really well is it is a satire that actually 100% captures the megachurch spirit and just kind of atmosphere and culture in a really brutally honest way. There are definite parts of this movie that are uncomfortable to sit through, especially for me, because not only is like the content of what you're watching kind of like uncomfortable in essence, but also from someone that has gone through church hurt and has experienced things that this movie addresses. This movie kind of is like an uncomfortable mirror staring that I've been staring at. Maybe that makes me the wrong person to talk about this movie. Maybe it makes me the right person. I don't know. I'm probably going to come at this from a little bit of a different standpoint because, again, I am a Christian. I've gone through church hurts. I've battled my own demons, and this movie just captures all of that. Anchored marvelously by the film's two leads in Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall. Honestly, I probably couldn't say which performance is stronger, though I would probably have to say it's edged out by Hall just because of how this movie ends and just how her performance kind of builds upon itself. I will also go on record by saying that Hall is probably, in this particular movie, is probably one of the single greatest performances that 2022 has given us. I mean, this movie has its issues, definitely, but Hall performing in them is definitely not one of them. Brown, on the other hand, again, still a truly dynamic performance. I think he captures perfectly the archetype of that megachurch pastor that is essentially trying to create his own redemption story, and the way this movie ends, I feel like encapsulates that archetype really well with his character, and just the very probably last words that he utters on screen just completely captures the essence of these types of leaders and leadership, and just Brown does a great job at bringing that to the big screen. I really like the way this movie's filmed too. Like, this movie has two subsequent like film styles with a third one tossed in there. And when I say the third one tossed in there, if you've ever kind of like grown up with cable, then maybe you probably know the Trinity Broadcast Network. And if you don't, I highly recommend checking out The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Not only the movie, which last time I checked as of this video was streaming on HBO Max, but also our episode. I'll provide a link for it in the descriptions below. But this kind of gives you an essence of what the TBN network is like televangelists and stuff like that. And it kind of has that like grainy feel to it, but it's like the 4:3 ratio. They do it really well. And they have this like, the way that they shoot the documentary is really interesting because it's not quite 4:3, it's not quite 16:9, it's kind of like a ratio that's in between, but it's distinctive enough to tell you that this is the in-house documentary that we are shooting for. And then on the flip side, it flips so gracefully to the 16:9, which is kind of the raw, real, in the moment footage of how this documentary / redemption journey is really affecting this husband and wife. One of the things I feel like this movie does really gracefully is its thematic elements. Like, yes, you have the documentary storyline going through, you have how the documentary is affecting Brown and Hall's characters and their marriage, but then you also have this sub like plot of how and why Brown's character kind of ends up where he does at the beginning of the movie. And it never comes right out and says it, but there's enough context that you can kind of draw your own conclusions. And I really like that this is a movie being made in 2022 that's allowing its audience to kind of make assumptions and is not just drawing lines for you. I feel like we used to get movies like that done all the time where you wouldn't have to explain things, and then we've kind of, as of recently, like, we've had to kind of jump into the connect the dots kind of mentality. And I think the less is more is a lot more impactful, and it's truly a lot more impactful because you really kind of see Brown's character in a completely different light after you start to draw these conclusions, and the climax of this movie really, really heightens that. And kind of just changes the entire perspective of the movie, and that's the reason why I will say the ending is as powerful as it is. That said, this movie ends in an unsatisfactory way for me, and I don't want to spoil it. I don't even want to tell you remotely how it ends, but it just ends on a really weird note, and I walked out of the theater really just kind of like, man, like, it was really good, it was building really good, and then credits. And I don't know, the way this movie ended, it just didn't do it for me. Talking about things that don't necessarily work for this movie, comedy is also another one. This movie is pitched as a satire, and it does the satirical elements really well. This is a great satire, not so much a great comedy. I felt like I could picture where certain, like, the jokes of the movie were, and that this is the part where you're supposed to laugh, and I couldn't connect with the comedy in this movie. I don't know if it's just my sense of humor or if it's my own past experiences with the church, but this movie, when it came to comedy, just didn't really work for me. Thankfully, those elements kind of seemed really far and few between. So let's jump into Rorschach rating. I'm going to go ahead and give Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul a 3.5 out of 5. I feel like this movie, again, anchored by brilliant performances. The pacing is pretty good, pretty solid for the most part, but where it falters is its ending and its comedy. But it works really well as a satire. Let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health from the movie of which we're reviewing and or discussing, simply to talk about it for a few moments in order to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I really try not to make content on here, and we as a team here at Victims and Villains, we try not to make content that feels like it's speaking to like one specific group. We try and generalize it because everyone goes through mental health. But I feel like with this movie, the best way that I can talk about mental health is talking to the married couples or those that are considering marriage or those that, I don't know. I feel like those are the two groups that I need to address right now. Now, I am not a married veteran by any means. I have only been married for about 8 years. But one of the things that I feel like this movie does really well is it addresses the correlation between marriage and mental health. And we've also done a full-length episode on marriage and mental health. I will provide a link in the show notes below for you guys to check out. I sat down with a marriage counselor a few years ago and just asked him questions about how marriage affects mental health. And Honk for Jesus definitely does that too. I think what's really interesting about this is Sterling K. Brown's character is essentially focused on getting the church back and kind of, his redemption story, and Regina Hall's character is focused on essentially saving their marriage. There comes a point where Hall's character is having breakfast with her mother, and she says, we're both fighting for something, I just don't know if we're fighting for the same goals. And really what I think this movie portrays and does a really good job at is when it comes to marriage, and really any relationship, period, is that relationship has to be about vulnerability, it has to be about trust, it has to be about laughter and crying and really growing with someone. Marriage and or any relationship needs to be focused on both partners' needs and desires and hopes and dreams and one another's mental health, because at the end of the day, whether we like to admit it or not, my mental health is affected by the decisions my wife makes and vice versa. And when we are one as a unit sharing common name now, one of the things that I've always kind of felt is examples in our marriage is that when I am anxious, she's the voice of reason, she's the voice of logic, and vice versa. And so it really affects, and you can kind of see how mental health is shared between a commonality, and I think Regina Hall's character really embodies that really well in here. And it's a stark reminder to always consider the mental health of your partner and whoever you're in a relationship with, or really at the end of the day, whoever you're close with, and being open and being honest with them. I really hope that helps, and I really hope that our marriage and mental health episode does justice. It's a giant deep dive discussion on that, and I think it's a really great tool for anyone that is considering marriage, anyone that's currently in marriage, or you're just in a committed relationship. I think it's a great episode, and I think that conversation speaks more volumes than anything I'm gonna say in this video regarding marriage and mental health. So click the notes in the show notes below, and as always, if you or someone you know is watching this and you're struggling with suicide, depression, or any mental health disorder or illness, click the links in the show notes below to check out our mental health resource library, and you guys can check out Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, in theaters now for Focus Features. Make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button and have a great weekend.